Welcome, Dr. Chapman. I have been wanting this interview for so long, and I feel like I hit the jackpot today. Thank you for being with me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Cabeca. Good to be with you.
Well, I have been an admirer of your work. And of course, this book, Five Love Languages, I think I originally read it a decade ago as I was coming through my divorce and wishing I had it in my marriage. So let's just dive into what are the five love languages and why are they so important that we should know them? And on that aside, as a dating woman in her mid-50s now, on many of the dating sites, people will say, hey, my love language is such and such. So it is really important to know.
Well, it is. I think one of our deepest emotional needs is the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. And what makes one person feel loved doesn't necessarily make another person feel loved. And that's where the love languages comes in. And so what I discovered is that there's 5 fundamental ways to express love, and each person has a primary love language. So out of the 5, one is more important than the others. So briefly, they are words of affirmation. You look nice in that outfit. I really appreciate what you did. One of the things I like about you is just using words to affirm the other person. And then there's acts of service.
Now, wait, with that words of affirmation, that should be easier than it is sometimes, right? So like if words are not your love language, that can be a really big challenge.
Yeah, and if you didn't receive words of affirmation growing up, it's a learning curve. But the good news about all these languages is you can learn them as an adult, even if you did not know them as a child or receive them as a child. You just take steps. Yeah, I said to a guy who said to me, he said, Dr. Chapman, my wife's love language is words of affirmation. And he said, I don't know how to do that. He said, I can't do that. I said, well, tell me 3 things that you appreciate about your wife. He said, well, she's a good cook. She's a good mother. She's a good school teacher. I said, okay. So I wrote out a sentence on each one of those for him and said, go home and stand in front of the mirror and read these out loud to yourself twice a day for this week. He came back. I said, can you say them without looking? And he did. I said, now your assignment is for the next 3 weeks, you give her one of these each week. He came back. He said, I did it. I said, how'd she respond? He said, well, on the 3rd week, she said to me, what's going on with you? I've never heard you give me so many compliments. And he said, well, honey, I'm trying to learn how to express love to you because I do love you. And she said, that is so sweet. I love you.
Yes.
He said, Dr. Chapman, I hadn't heard her say that in a long time. So, you take baby steps, but you can learn to speak any of these languages.
Perfect. That sounds good. All right. So words of affirmation, number 1.
And 2. Then acts of service, doing something for the other person that they would like for you to do. In a marriage, that would be such things as cooking meals, washing dishes, vacuuming floors, cleaning the baby's diaper. Ooh, that's a big act of service.
Oh, yeah.
Washing the car, mowing the grass, walking the dog, anything that they would like for you to do. Remember the old saying, actions speak louder than words. If this is your love language, that will be true. It's not true for everyone, but it is true for those for whom this is their language.
And that is definitely true for me, too. Definitely acts of service. I'm like, show me, don't tell me. And, that is truthful. And I think maybe for physicians, people in the service-oriented fields, is that more common to be an acts of service person, or it depends?
No, I don't know. I think it depends on a lot of factors, Mm-hmm. But my wife's language is acts of service also. And in the early years, I gave her words of affirmation because that was my language. And I would tell her how much I loved her and all this. And one day she said, honey, you keep saying I love you. If you love me, why don't you help me? I was blown out of the saddle because I knew nothing about love language in those days. But for some people, acts of service is their primary language. And then there's gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. Before I studied counseling, I did an undergrad and a master's degree in cultural anthropology, the study of cultures. We've never found a culture where gift giving is not an expression of love. It's universal to give gifts. The gift says they were thinking about me. Look what they got from me. And the gift doesn't have to be expensive. We've always said it's the thought that counts. But I remind people, it's not the thought left in your head that counts. It's the gift that came out of the thought in your head, okay? So there's gifts. And then there's quality time, giving them your undivided attention. I do not mean sitting on the couch watching television. Someone else has your attention. TV is off, computer's down. We're not answering our phone. We're looking at each other. We're talking. We're sharing life together. Undivided attention. And it doesn't have to be sitting down. You can take a walk down the road and talk. And you don't even have to be talking. It can be doing something that the other person enjoys doing. Like maybe you want to plant a flower garden together, but you have their full attention. And that's what makes them feel loved. And then the last one is physical touch. And we've long known the emotional power of physical touch. In a marriage, that is such things as holding hands and kissing and embracing and the whole sexual part of marriage, arm around the shoulder, driving down the road, you put your hand on their leg, just affirming touches. And as I said earlier, the basic idea is that out of those 5, each of us has a primary love language. And if you don't speak their primary, they will not feel loved, even though you may be speaking some of the other languages.
Well, I have lived that truth for sure, both on the receiving and giving ends of that. So I've been, really feeling blessed to learn this, and not just with romantic relationships of my life, but with my children, with my 4 daughters. Learning each of their love languages has been a real blessing in our relationships too. With my little one, who's just about to be 13, I thought it was quality time, but it is words of affirmation. And when I had her do one of your love language quizzes, and she goes, "Mom, of course it's words of affirmation." She goes, "When you say something positive and encourage me, it just lights me up." I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, to parents, I say, the question is not, do you love your children? The question is, do your children feel loved? I mean, by nature, we love our children. But if we don't speak their love language, they won't feel loved. I remember a 13-year-old young man that ended up in my office. He had run away from home. And in my office, he said to me, "My parents don't love me. They love my brother, but they don't love me." I knew his parents. I knew they loved him. The problem is they'd never learned how to speak his love language. So yeah, it's extremely important in the parent-child relationship or any really close relationship.
I think so. So, Dr. Chapman, how do you tell people to find out or discover their own love language and communicate that as well as the love language of those they love?
Well, there are some informal ways that you can do that. Number one is simply observe their behavior or observe your own behavior. How do you by nature respond to people in general? If you're always giving people affirming words, encouraging words, that's probably what you want, because we tend to speak our own language. With children, you can determine their love language by the age of 4 using this, observing their behavior. My son's love language is physical touch. When he was that age and I would come home from work, he'd run to the door and grab my leg and climb all over me. He's touching me because he wants to be touched. Our daughter never did that. Our daughter would say at that age, "Daddy, come into my room. I want to show you something." She wanted quality time, my undivided attention. So observe the behavior. And then what do you complain about most often? Or what do they complain about?
Oh, I'll tell you what I complain about. Yeah, like help me out. Give me a hand.
So the complaint reveals the love language. If a wife says, for example, "I just feel like we don't ever see each other anymore. I mean, we're busy and I feel like we're ships passing in the night." She's complaining that she's not getting quality time. So yeah, whatever the complaint is, if a child's complaining about something, I remember a mother told me this. A 6-year-old son said to his mother, "We don't ever go to the park anymore since the baby came." He and his mother used to go to the park. He had her undivided attention. But now the baby's here and he's not getting that quality time. He's speaking loudly. "This is what I need." So what do you complain about? And then the third is, what do you request most often? Because the request also reveals the love language. And my daughter, when she was a teenager, she would say to me 2 or 3 nights a week, "Dad, can we take a walk after dinner?" And I'd say, "Sure, honey, as soon as I finish dishes for your mama."
Right, because your wife is acts of service.
Yeah, acts of service. Yeah, fill mama's love tank, and then I'll take you for a walk. So yeah, so those 3 things, you can pretty well figure out your own love language or someone else's language. Now, there is also a free quiz online. at 5lovelanguages.com. There's a quiz for married couples. Yeah, and it's also in the back of that book. Yeah. But there's a quiz for married couples, there's a quiz for single adults, there's a quiz for teenagers, and then there's a little game type thing you play for younger children to determine their love language. So I'd say try the informal ways and see what you come up with, and then take the quiz and see if it affirms what you have discovered informally.
I love that. And I want to thank you for sharing this 5 love languages. Okay, everyone, you guys got to figure out your own. Please comment below, share with me, let me know what your love languages are or is, your primary love language. Work on figuring that out, and I can't wait to hear it. We'll be right back digging deep with Dr. Gary Chapman into why it's so important to know your love language and what happens if you guys aren't speaking, if we're not speaking each other's love language. So we'll be right back.